I'm Scott. I'm an addict. It, I was born in Indianapolis in 1970, and then I moved over to Germany, and I had my first taste with alcohol at age 4. My dad was an alcoholic, and we were at a Strassenfest, and I was thirsty, and he brought me back a beer. So that was my first dabble with that. But my dad was also very abusive, physical. I mean, I can remember back when I was 4, I got 4 spankings across my face with a big one of those big belt buckles. And the abuse went on for another 3 or 4 years, and we ended up moving back over to Missouri in the middle of the night because we just couldn't deal with the abuse anymore. And we moved in with my grandma, and God love her, I thought it was a safe environment. She wasn't physically abusive, but she was pretty hardcore. So what I thought was going to be a safe place wasn't. And we ended up moving again. So we moved around quite a bit, which made it hard to make friends. It made it hard to kind of know where I fit in. So I would talk to everybody because I did not know. I didn't have a place where I could fit in with. I couldn't fit in with the people on sports and whatever, and I just felt like there was something missing. And then I would say 11 or 12, and I ended up getting sexually abused. And that just kind of sent things into a real tailspin. Because I didn't know, for being a boy, you don't talk about that. And so really not knowing where to fit in, that was a big thing for me. I wasn't happy with myself. I thought there was things wrong with me. So off and on over the next few years, I dabbled in alcohol. I really didn't hit any drugs. But I was constantly fighting at school. And I guess that was my way of reaching out for attention because I wasn't getting it anywhere else. And then at 17, I had a bad accident at work. And that was my first taste of painkillers. I hurt my back, and I had a doctor that was just working the pain meds out. Now I found I was able to fit in with people. I would be taking the painkillers, and I found what I was missing. What I was missing on the inside, I found it with just getting high up the pain meds. So then that went on for the next few years, and I got married at 19, and got divorced at 22, and I started working 2 jobs and just burning the candles at both ends, and still doing the pain meds. But then I got introduced to meth from a manager at work, and that's when my addiction really took off. It, being the shy person I was, once I did once I tried the meth, everybody was my friend because they knew I always had it. And then I was doing, when you came over to my house, there was meth, there was coke, there was pot, you name it, there was. So I was just on top of the world because people liked me. I might not have liked myself, but people liked me because of what I had. And this went on for quite a while, and finally I just had I'd had enough, and I went into treatment, and I'd spent 32 days in treatment, and got out, but I didn't go to any meetings, I didn't do any, I just didn't work any programs. I thought I had it on my own, and that was fine for about 6 weeks, and then I just fell back in. And my addiction just really, it went full blown then. I couldn't hold any relationships. Because I'd be all in on a relationship, and then after a while I would pull back. And until I went into treatment this last time, I didn't understand why. But it was because of my growing up. I would be waiting for the ball to drop in the relationship that I was in. I knew that I was going to be abandoned. So to protect myself, myself, I would pull back. So I could not hold a relationship for nothing. No good friends. The only friends I had were in the drug game. And my drug use was just spiraling out of control. I got arrested in '96. Ended up having by the grace of God, I just got paper. I didn't do any prison time. But you would have thought that would have stopped my addiction. No. Since I didn't do any prison time, I thought I was good, so that continued. Well, by this time, I'm on my second marriage, and I was doing it to where I was a functioning addict because I was still able to hold a job. My wife at the time did not have a clue. But on the inside, I wasn't happy with myself, and the only way that I was happy was in drugs. And the only way I could get through the day, the only way I could go to work was if I had my drugs. And I had, during the day it was meth and it was coke, and at night it was marijuana or alcohol to kind of wind down. But after a while, I just continued to be up and up and up and up. And there was a point where my father came back into my life after his fifth marriage, and he asked to move in with me after I'd got divorced, and I had told him yes, but he couldn't drink. And so he moved in, and I'm telling this man not to drink, and this is how messed up I was in my disease. I'm telling him not to drink, but yet I'm having keg parties in the next room. I'm having people over all the time, and the drugs, the alcohol, and he can't drink. Well, finally, there was a lady across the street that lost her job, and I was paying her to clean my place. And she called me one day, and I went over to her house, and she had a bunch of empty whiskey bottles. And I told my dad to get out because I was not thinking about him not being able to drink with alcohol in the next room. I was thinking about all the abuse that I went through growing up. So I kicked him out. And when I had him come back in, I just wanted my dad back. I wanted to build that relationship. But how could I do that if my addiction was still in full force and I'm doing partying and he's being stuck in his room? So then about 6 weeks later, my sister's mother-in-law passed away, and my dad was there, and he was trying to apologize. And I was still hurt. Not that he drank in the house. My mind was still thinking about growing up. And I told him no, and in my mind there's always tomorrow, I'm not ready yet. He went to sleep one night and never woke up. So the last conversation I had with my dad was fighting. So that was real hard for me to deal with, and that took my drinking, that took my drug use into a tailspin out of this world. I turned into a train wreck, absolute train wreck, and I was just mowing everybody down that got in my way. So I didn't care. I didn't care about myself, so why should I care about anybody else? So then I ended up, after my third divorce, and again, it was all because of my addiction. I met a girl that I had known forever, and things were good. I had a good job. She was just what I was looking for. She had 2 wonderful kids, a nice house, and I was, for the longest time, I was still able to hold I was able to kind of pull back and hide my use to the pain meds and to the other drugs. We would go out and listen to bands at bars, so it was okay to drink. That was my go ahead for the alcohol. I was safe there. So then in 2013, when my job closed down, a friend of mine called me and said, hey, you need to come over, you need to try this. Well, then that introduced me to ice. And from 2013 until 2016 was the worst 3 years of my life in addiction. I thought I'd been a train wreck before. I started pulling back from my fiance at the time because, again, when is the ball going to drop? When am I going to get abandoned? But I knew the only thing that wouldn't abandon me was the drugs. So, I slowly started pawning stuff with her. I slowly started pawning stuff with my mom. I was just spending my paycheck, making excuses left and right. I was doing whatever I could so I could get my fix. Well, then around 2015, it was to the point to where there was really nothing left that I could sneak out of my fiance's house to pawn. It was that bad. And she ended up kicking me out. So I ended up moving in with my mom. And this was around May of 2015. And my addiction was just, my drug use was way out of control. So I ended up stealing about $400 from my mom. And she found out about it. And she told me to get out of her house. And, as an addict, it's not our fault. We didn't do it. It's everybody else. Somebody must have did it and framed me. That was my mindset. My mom tells me to get out. And so I get out, and now I'm homeless. And 3 days later, my mom has a brainstem stroke, and she eventually passes away. So now I'm dealing with my dad's passing and us fighting. And then my mom, and my mom, God love her, even when I was even throughout my addiction, she knew, but she didn't want me to know, but I knew she knew, if that made any sense. But my mom loved me unconditionally, no matter what. She would always give me money when I asked. She would pick me up if I needed to go somewhere, if my car was broke down. She was always there, but I always blew her off. And I think it was because when I was growing up, my stepdad had taken some money from me, and my mom was kind of stuck in the middle because my stepdad was he had a painkiller problem. So there were some issues there that nobody else knew about, but my mom was stuck in the middle. She didn't know which way to turn, but because she didn't pick me, that was stuck in my mind. So when she would try to, for holidays, I'd always blow them off. I would go over the next day or whatever. I'd go over just get my present, or that was just my mindset. So when she passed away, that really hit me hard. So I had thought that should have been my bottom, and I thought that my addiction was really bad. No, it just it was the most god awful next year and a half of my entire life. I ended up bouncing from place to place to place. I told myself that I'm just a drug addict. I'm not going to take it to the next level. I'm not going to shoot. I started doing that. 2015, I was in a bad accident. And I ended up laying, after it was a motor scooter accident, I lay there for 6 hours before somebody found me. Well, by the time I got to the hospital, I didn't have a pulse, and I almost lost my leg. But by the grace of God, they did an emergency surgery, and so for the next month and a half, I was in the hospital. So when I get out, this is how bad my addiction mindset was. Because I lay there for 6 hours and didn't go into shock. I saved my life. Even though I was on ice that caused the accident, that saved my life. That was just my way of thinking. So I really went full blown for the next year. It was just, I mean, in the past, what I mowed down was nothing compared to what I did. I'd been held at gunpoint. Had knives pulled on me. It's just one thing after another, and I'd been in there from 2015 to 2016. I'd been in and out of treatments and psych wards, and thinking if I went into a treatment center or a psych ward for 7 days and just got away from the drugs, got away from everything, I'd be all right. Well, I got out, and that lasted about 2 hours, and then I'd be back in swing. So then around, it was December of 2016, I went into a treatment center. It was a psych ward. Well, I was homeless, so then they took me and dropped me off at a place in St. Louis, and I stayed there one night, and found another night I could stay for the next 2 nights. I found another place I could stay, but that's when I realized my bottom had hit, because I was scared. I didn't have anybody to talk to. I had nowhere to turn. I wasn't sure where I was going to get my next meal. I was going to freeze to death. And that's when I really started praying to God, just to let me die. I was praying to Him constantly, just put me out of my misery, just let me die. Well, the last night I was there was two other homeless people that were fighting. And one, if I wouldn't have been there, the guy would have died, because he was about ready just to get stabbed repeatedly, and I'd stopped that. And I ended up I ended up leaving and getting to a place just south of St. Louis. And I had a roof over my head. I had some food. I was able to shower. But then I started shooting up twice a day. And I was up for a 9-day stretch. Well, at that point, I'd end up walking altogether that day like 20 miles. And I was hearing voices. I thought people were following me. And I got into a store and I collapsed. And when the paramedics showed up, I just begged them. I said, let me die. And they said, we can't do that. And I said, no, you can't, just leave. But by the grace of God, they took me to a treatment center, and I slept, it was a hospital / psych ward, and I slept for 4 days, and then I woke up, and they asked me what I wanted, and I said, I needed treatment. So they got me into treatment, and I spent 26 days in the treatment center in St. Charles, and got out and went into a sober living house. And I got out January 26th of this year. And, when you're in treatment, you keep hearing 90 meetings in 90 days, get a sponsor, got to do all that stuff. I wanted to hear that, but I also wanted to hear how I could get better, how I could get my mind clear, because I didn't want to get out of treatment and go back to the thought I was, because I was done. I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired. And since then, I've hit the meetings and I've done everything that you have to do for recovery. And my higher power's God, and He's just been blessing me left and right. I've had to deal with, I've been around people that have went back out and used, and I was with my tools, and I'm praying. I haven't done it. And, today, of all days, I'm celebrating 9 months clean. But that's because I've had to do things that I didn't want to do. And I've had to realize, I had to figure out who I was. And I had to take care of that and be happy who I was, so I didn't go back out using. And, by the grace of God, because of my recovery, I'm able to call in and do this. October 14th, I'm speaking to a college football team in this town. And I'm able to reach out and help a lot of people. So, I think the 29 years of, I was in the drug game for 29 years, and countless suicide attempts, and just wanting to die, and now my life is good. I'm just blessed. Absolutely blessed. My life isn't perfect, no, but it's good. It's phenomenal. So, um, I'm just happy, brother. I'm just happy.